Highland Dirks were the inseparable companion of the Scottish Highlanders, so today we're going to try and make our own. Now the blade length of a Highland Dirk can vary from a decently sized knife all the way up to a short sword. Personally, I'm inclined to make it big. The starting stock I'm going to be using for this is a piece of leaf spring. As this is such a large piece of metal, we're going to be doing this with a striker. So one person will hold the tongs while the other person swings a sledgehammer. This will cut down on time. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit here, we're going to stretch out a tang a little bit.
Okay.
And then we're going to thin up back here just a little ways too.
So I want to hit.
All right, so as it was getting too big, I went and cut off about 8 or so inches from the tip, which gives me much more of the shape and size that I want for the Dirk. And then we'll go and draw a new tip out. The sledgehammer worked great for getting the basic shape of the Dirk. Now we need to do a little more fine work with the hammer. Now, granted, I did use just a hand hammer for some of this, but there were some issues with here. So the whole thing was made thin, and then the ends upsetted more than the center, and that is why it is thicker at the edges than it is in the center. So with some delicacy on a hand hammer, I'll just go and clean that up and make it all a uniform thickness, tapering out onto the edges. So the inverse of what it is currently. Using the step of the anvil allows me to bevel the edges of the blade. This makes it so I have to do a lot less grinding, because if I had to grind all this down, not only would it waste metal and belts, but it would take hours to do so. So doing this with a hammer saves a lot of time. Approximately 15 minutes at the anvil saves an hour of grinding. Overall, the blade's looking pretty good, but the end here is still just a little fatter than it should be. So this is gonna need thinned out a little bit on this side, that side too, a little bit. Right here is where it's thinnest, that's a problem. But other than that, it's looking pretty good. All right, so the next part is something that I'm a little nervous for because I've never done this before in a blade, but this will be putting a fuller into the blade. Now, the fullers on these are off-centered and on only one side. So to do this, I'm gonna be using what's called a guillotine. And it's pretty much what it sounds like. The top die lifts up, the blade goes in, and you hammer down on it. The initial grinding of the blade is done. However, it is not finished. The next thing that needs to happen is the blade needs to be quenched. And unfortunately, my quenching tank just is not going to be big enough no matter how I angle this. So I need a larger quenching tank, which I do not have. However, I do have access to this piece of pipe, which is a beautiful size for this, as it will clear without touching the bottom, and it has plenty of room around the sides. Unfortunately, this pipe has no bottom, but we can remedy it. And so my theory is that the water will wick away the heat before that this gets hot enough to melt the adhesive. All right, well, this did seem to work. It appears to have held. It's actually not that warm. Overall, I'm glad it worked. I would definitely recommend, you don't do this at home. This was definitely a little sketchy, and this was only a temporary solution. But hey, it seemed to work, and I got my blade quenched. And it got a bit of a warp, but it's nothing I can't live with. shoot. Well, unfortunately, the handle split down a crack that was in the middle of it. Yep. Just trash that. Man, this stinks. Well, what happened was there was a crack that was running down this, and I just caught that crack, which blew it apart. This just happens sometimes with lathe work. It's just kind of the way it is. So I'm gonna start this over. I'm gonna do it a little differently this time. Instead of going and drilling it and then burning the handle fitting, I'm gonna split the handle in half and then hollow out and glue it together. Well, that fit ain't bad. It's pretty tight. It's actually, I think the fit overall is better than the last one. So now I'm going back to the lathe for our second attempt at turning down our new block that we've made. But while I'm working on this, if you could go down in the comments section and post an idea for something else that you would like to see me make, I would really appreciate it. Or if you like somebody else's idea, that would be awesome too. Now, unfortunately, due to the way that this is made, there's now a big ugly spot on the bottom where you have a hole and the mark from where the lathe connects. So I thought what would make a really good plate to cover that is the MF that we engraved in a previous video. So I'll cut this off, sink it into the butt plate, and then I think that'll look really cute. One final thing that I want to do with this is the handle. It's just this off, plain, blah. So what I want to do is I want to see if I can stain it by mixing together food coloring and alcohol.